Greetings. Happy Monday. Aaron, the bottom screen is out. Figured I'd just say it out loud this time so that people didn't think I was making a bunch of weird looks, which is what I did the last time the bottom screen was out. And that distracted everybody. You remember that? It was like 3 days ago.
I do.
So figured I'd just say it out loud this time.
We all remember it because you're telling us.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, socially awkward is kind of what we do. I'm Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzen. He's Auron MacIntyre. And it's back. There it is. We are the Steve Deace Show. We are brought to you by our friends over at Relief Factor. Meet Bob. He's 63 years old, but he has spent the last 40 years as a body man and a car painter. That takes its wear and tear on the old body. Bob says I could barely walk, couldn't make it up the stairs. Then he started the Relief Factor 3-week quick start, and guess what happened? After day 4 or 5, he started to feel the change. 8 days in, he said I was 75% better. I'm comfortable now. I'm thoroughly impressed. You could be their next success story. Now, no guarantee you're going to be the next Bob, but you might be the next Todd, Aaron, Steve, Tim. Probably won't be the next Candace. But you could be their next success story. 70% odds that a 3-week quick start is going to see the results that you've been looking for. So why don't you see, if you don't see a difference in 3 weeks or less, when you go to relieffactor.com, especially when it costs just $20 to find out. At relieffactor.com, get the 3-week quick start today at relieffactor.com. And also, we just started a brand new show here on The Blaze. We are very excited about maybe the most effective activist we have on our side in this era, Chris Rufo, starting a new show now as well with Jonathan Lomez Keeperman. It's called Rufo and Lomez. It's available right here on BlazeTV as well as YouTube as well. Very excited about this edition with Chris Rufo here on BlazeTV. All right, coming up, we're very excited about today's show as well. Bob Vander Plaats is going to be joining us here. He recently went out and visited with the TPUSA Faith and went to one of their Freedom Nights with Greg Laurie. He's going to give us a little report about that, as well as a couple of the other things that are going on. And, well, we're going to get into this. You know, the Iowa governor's race has a connection to the shutdown, which I'm sure will be in Aaron's montage in a few minutes, not knowing the rundown, but I'm sure it'll be in there. And there is a connection between the two that I will explain. We'll get Bob's take on that coming up at the bottom of the hour as well. And then next hour, there is absolutely a necessary conversation trying to happen and needs to happen on our side about reassessing things from a foreign policy perspective, from a cultural perspective. And yet, when we try to have these conversations, we have situations with atheists who think that they are the self-appointed sheriff of Nottingham of the American right and start coining a term called woke right to the point now. We have discussed this on our show how many times off the air, and we have all decided we don't know really what it means. Maybe it had an original meaning, but I mean, this thing has just become diluted to, if you're not willing to do anything other than the traditional Republican Party methodology that failed a generation, you're now labeled this or something, right? And so then there is also the controversy. Tucker platforming Nick Fuentes, whatever literally in the Sam Hill, if not hell, Candace Owens is currently doing. All right. And so on one hand, we need some boundaries. On the other hand, they cannot be the boundaries we had before. So we have somebody on our team that we know very well that was among the first to get this woke right label. Auron MacIntyre is going to join us in the next hour of the show. And we have all we're going to do, him and I are just going to sit down and see if we can come now and reason together. Because him and I were talking last week when all this was going down and kind of came to the conclusion that if the two of us with our relationship cannot have this conversation, then maybe it just simply cannot happen and we're screwed. All right. So we're going to try to have the conversation that a lot of you want to have. I mean, a lot of you have sent me notes, hey, ask this person. I have texted, and a lot of times I've texted this person or that person myself personally, had Todd ask. We're not just sitting here, just wondering, not, just, with ESP, wondering people's motivations and true thoughts from afar. All right. So this is our attempt to see, if the perceived differences are the same as the real differences on our side, and then how we can proceed as a movement at a time when we need to be unified, but unified around the right things more than ever before. So that is coming up in the next hour of the show. But first, let's get this thing started with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Reopening. Over a month into the record-breaking shutdown, enough Senate Democrats broke with their party to advance a key vote. 8 Senate Democrats broke from their party late Sunday night to break the filibuster in a 60-40 vote, advancing key legislation and putting the government back on track to reopen after a record 41-day stalemate. The Senate is expected to formally pass the legislation today, when the continuing resolution will be punted back to the House. Characterizations of the deal this group of Democrats made with Republicans is varied, with some saying this is the same deal Republicans gave them a month ago, and others characterizing this as a Republican sellout, with a vote coming up on Obamacare subsidies in December and a reinstatement of fired federal workers during the shutdown. We shall see. President Trump made several ovations regarding affordability over the weekend on Truth Social, blaming health insurance companies for the cost of health care and health insurance, instructing the Department of Justice to investigate shady dealings, allegedly from meatpacking companies, that may result in high meat costs, floating the idea of a 50-year mortgage instead of the common 30-year mortgage, and promising a $2,000 tariff dividend check to everyone, excluding high-income earners. Definitely seems the White House is aware the economic shifts they've started implementing are not being felt out in the cheap seats. Here's Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent over the weekend.
What we're not going to do is what happened under the Biden administration, where the administration and the media gaslit everyone and said, there's a vibe session. You don't understand how good you have it. And what happened then was we had the worst inflation 40 or 50 years, 22, 23%. But the basket of goods and services for working Americans was up more than 30%. And what we're seeing is we had to stop the increase first. Now we are starting to see prices level off, come down. Gasoline is down, interest rates are down, so mortgages are down, and I think we are making substantial progress on that. And I think over the coming months and the next year, prices are going to come down.
And now here's this: a forensic analysis of a female former U.S. Capitol Police officer's gait is a 94 to 98% match to the unique stride of the long-sought January 6th pipe bombing suspect, according to a Blaze News investigation confirmed by several intelligence sources. A source close to the congressional investigation of January 6th additionally told Blaze News evidence has emerged recently that pointed towards law enforcement possibly being involved in the planting of the pipe bombs. A software algorithm that analyzes walking parameters, including knee bend, hip extension, speed, step length, cadence, and variance, rated a 31-year-old female former Capitol Police officer as a 94% match to the bombed suspect shown in videos from January 5th of 2021. The subject allegedly left Capitol Police in mid-2021, and a Central Intelligence Agency spokeswoman by the name of Liz Lyons told Blaze News the subject worked in campus security. Moving on, one item lost in the shuffle of last week's off-year election results is that Omar Fattah, the Somalia-devoted son of Somali immigrants and Islamunist who was running for Minneapolis mayor, he lost his race to incumbent mayor and communist Jacob Frey. Fattah underperformed with Somalians in Minneapolis, and some are connecting the dots. That's because Fattah comes from a disfavored Somalian tribal bloodline. In completely unrelated news, on the UK's Remembrance Day a few days ago, ITV interviewed a 100-year-old World War II veteran.
What does Remembrance Sunday mean for you? What is your message?
My message is, I can see in my mind's eye there was rows and rows of white stones of all the hundreds of my friends and everybody else that gave their lives for what? The country of today. No, I'm sorry. The sacrifice wasn't worth the result that it is now.
Oh, well, I'm sorry.
What do you mean by that, though? At this point?
What we fought for, was our freedom. We find that even now it's darn sight worse than what it was when I fought for it.
And finally, let's check in on New York City, shall we? Here's Zoran Mamdani, mayor-elect.
And this is the first Jamaat that I have been to since we won our election on Tuesday.
In further unrelated news, here are the New York Jets cheerleaders in a few years. And that's what happened while we were away.
Aaron's Montage brought to you by a new contraption over at our friends at Chirp that I had a chance to try over the weekend. The rolling powered massager, otherwise known as the RPM Mini. And boy, howdy. In fact, after a while, my wife had to tell me, just turn it on. I don't think you're supposed to be running it that long. All right. Felt good, man. I got a few trigger points in the neck, shoulder blade. And hey, it's not easy to convince people when it comes to pain relief products that this thing works, especially the ones that you can use yourself at home. Let's face it, there's a lot of stigmas and scams out there. But Chirp's mission is simple. Bring relief to as many people as possible so that you can feel better, restore your energy, and make self-care simple with a whole new category of product called Relief. And they're constantly innovating to deliver professional-grade therapies so that you can use them at home and not to have to go and do all the various expensive appointments. So if you want to try the RPM, the Contour, which we previously told you about, the Halo, which Aaron recommends, visit GoChirp, like a birdie chirp, gochirp.com/Steve, and use the promo code Steve at checkout for 10% off site-wide. That's gochirp.com/Steve. Use the promo code Steve at checkout for 10% off site-wide at gochirp.com/Steve using the promo code Steve. All right, let's get into the end of the shutdown. I believe 41 days, correct?
I think that's
so,
right.
yeah.
Yeah.
41 days. And this is actually the first time it's made news in about 35 of those days.
Correct.
All right, is the ending of it. And let me say this as a disclaimer and a caveat up front. I do not want to think what I am about to articulate. I don't want to think this. I don't. But just walk me through this chain of events, if you don't mind, and tell me, what other conclusion am I supposed to draw? Because if you can come up with one more optimistic than the one I'm about to give you, I'm in. I want your reality to be reality. That's what I want. Fair enough? Okay.
Yep.
So walk me through this chain of events. We have a shutdown. All right. In the first few weeks of said shutdown, Trump's polling is actually stable, if not up a little bit. As the shutdown goes on, Trump's polling begins to decline. We get into off-year elections, which were, of course, places typically where we don't do well recently anyway. You know, Virginia, for example, New Jersey, where we haven't done well in decades. All right. And it's not just that we lose there, but we get annihilated in these places. I mean, just there's nothing good. You're not taking anything good whatsoever from those elections. Nothing. Okay. It was so bad that Daniel Horowitz came on here last week and he was like, well, I mean, they won in some areas they wouldn't typically win, so it's not like they can hold those seats for long term, right? That happened last Wednesday.
Mm-hmm.
Correct. Okay. We got absolutely annihilated. All right. Shortly thereafter, shutdown ends with virtually the same deal that we could have had before. And then it just so happens to end right when a couple of days of mass cancellations of flights, and we're heading into the busiest flight season of the year between Thanksgiving and Christmas. So this thing gets done. Democrats get the outcomes they want, get the thing done before there's mass cancellations over the holidays where now everybody's just pissed at everybody. And if you're a politician, you're in bad shape regardless of which party you're in. And it just so happens they walk away with a coalition of people that are, quote, now labeled moderates, from Tim Kaine, who just told us last month that God-given rights is what the Nazis believed. Remember that clip from the well of the Senate not a month ago. John Fetterman, who I am just becoming convinced post-vaccine injury healing, he's the shrewdest politician in America. He's just figured out, if I just go on Fox News and say a whole bunch of stuff that I'm never going to follow up on, a lot of these doopy Republican voters will just fall for it and claim I'm reasonable and help me to keep winning a increasingly reddening state in Pennsylvania, where I'm trying to win statewide. Because he could have voted to the shutdown he apologized for this morning. How many times could he have voted to end this? Right?
Sure.
I mean, how many days could he have? Because he just happened to do it now, and we get the perfect week Last week, they got the election results they wanted. I mean, you couldn't just do it like a day or two after. That would just be too obvious, right? So you wait a week, and then you've got enough lag period for all these canceled flights and all these people in the airline industry to get back to work in what's the busiest airline travel season of the year. So you've given yourself a 2-week buffer to get everything back up to speed, everything back up to full capacity, so that no one's missing out on going to grandma's house over Christmas or Easter. Over Thanksgiving, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we ended up with literally no major concessions whatsoever on our own side. First of all, is that chain of events accurate? If I'm missing something, tell me. If I've misinterpreted something, tell me. If I've, by all means, let's start there. Is that chain of events relatively accurate?
Oh, it's accurate. The only thing, I don't think this was your intent, but no one should get the impression that like this is a new playbook. I don't think that's what you're trying to claim.
For right now, we're not drawing any conclusions other than these events. Did these events take place in roughly the order that I have assessed them here?
Of course they did.
Aaron, is that relatively correct?
Relatively, yes. I don't know how much play this had on it, but Trump going after health insurance companies as well, I'm not sure how much that played into it, if at all.
Okay. So then now let's get to the aftermath of this. The aftermath to this is Republicans will not repeal the filibuster in the Senate. So we simply will not pass really meaningful legislation for the next how many months until they go on recess next August, and then they'll be gone most of the time, I would guess, to hit the campaign trail. Okay. So much of the legislative record we have right now to run on next year in the midterms, much of that is going to be our legislative record. So we're left to forces we cannot control to some degree, like the Federal Reserve, interest rates, things of that nature. There's no mass amount of voters who are like, by all means, turn off my spigot in the gravy train so we can run a tighter belt. We're racing to do dividends on tariffs in anticipation that literally at any moment the Supreme Court's likely going to say that's not a power the president unilaterally can impose. Okay? And now we've got kind of Trump in kind of spitballing phase because he has a Congress he cannot work with. Some of it his own fault, frankly, because he's endorsed how many countless rhinos. I don't have to summarize every Daniel Horowitz column for the last 5 years. Okay? But he's endorsed countless rhinos, and often so early in the primary cycle that we just didn't have time to get, any kind of MAGA grassroots figure a chance to build up a campaign to see if they're credible. Like, there's really no reason to endorse Ashley Hinson in the Iowa Senate race the day after she announces. I mean, the primary is not until next June. You could at least, see 4 or 5 months later if someone shows up and is a better candidate, and if not, or they're a retard, then you just endorse Ashley Hinson. We all move on, right? I mean, that entire Senate primary was literally just canceled. But that's not the only time this has happened. This has happened numerous times. So now we're like, some bright ideas we have are, well, what do you think about government and banks making more money off of your home loan? What do you think of that option? How about like indentured servitude, like lifetime loan payments? What do you think? 50 years. And the payments will be lower. I guess we'll move the market now. But banks, which are largely regulated by government, so I repeat myself. So the banks and government basically have more power, more revenue than they ever had before, because the government's regulating the banks, telling them what rate they can charge and things of that nature, at least as a median rate, and then also giving you property taxes on top of that. Again, stop me here.
Oh, I'd like to.
I mean, tell me I'm wrong about where this is headed right now.
Nope.
We got to win in that we at least have the Republicans showing us they can go, to a shutdown and hold firm moving forward. All right. But moving forward, I got to be honest with you, as I always try to be. I'm not sure that this, in fact, I don't know what strategy to go with if this is who we are led by and surrounded by. I'm not really sure what to do. In fact, I don't think there is a strategy, which is why I think you got Trump kind of doing the let's try some stuff. I think he's at the we're just trying stuff phase. Okay. What about 50-year mortgages then? Maybe you can at least get the, this housing market moving. The mortgage payments are cheaper. Dude's just trying stuff at this point. I guarantee you they didn't workshop 50-year mortgages for 6 months. I promise you they didn't do that. Okay. So, I don't know. And, worldview is destiny. We have too many people wearing our jersey that really don't share our core worldview. They share our criticisms of the opposition's worldview. But in many cases, they really don't share the fundamentals of our own. And then, to be brutally honest, we're really not even sure if the fundamentals of our own worldview could win in the arena of ideas on Election Day, because we just may be so godless that the answer to that question is no. Like, we may finally get an answer to that and may not like our answer. You see what I'm saying?
Oh, I see.
I mean, trying to, remember how I described last year's election. Last year's election was really, do you prefer living in New York City in the 1990s, which is the last time the country was somewhat unified around a regular set of values to some degree? Or would you rather live in New York City, San Francisco, Washington, D.C. in 2025? That we were trying to roll the clock back, have a timeout. Let's forget the whole last 30 years actually happened, and we're going to get a do-over. That's kind of how we described the last election. Right? Okay. It's entirely possible. I'm trying to make sure no one subscribes to this podcast today, basically, with this monologue. I think I'm going to hit it with this. I'm going to reach that goal, I think. No new subscribers today with what I'm about to say next. It's entirely possible that Trump has not sold us out with all these rhino endorsements like some of us think, but is actually more aware of the fact the country, that we're too retarded of a base, and we'll put up some kind of, neo-Nazi incel if left ungirded, and the country's too godless, okay, that he's saving us from ourselves. I can't sit here and tell you today especially after the events of the last month around here, I cannot sit here and tell you on November 10th, 2025, that is not true, or at least has some truth to it. I mean, I have no idea why Trump needs to sell out to Lindsey Graham, for example. Lindsey Graham needs Trump more than the other. Could just very well be Trump knows some elements within his own base better than the rest of us do. And left organically, they will arise, and then we'll just lose every election conceivable. I don't know. What I do know is I'm trying to figure out what the point of the last 41 days ended up being, other than Democrats ruthlessly getting even more votes in an off-year election than they were already going to get. I'm trying to figure out what outcome we got out of this. So, gentlemen, talk me. I haven't been Vander Plaats since July 12th, 2024, the day before Trump got shot, was the last time I was Vander Plaats. I'm feeling fairly Vander Plaats this morning. So please, by all means, all right, I'm at the edge. I'm looking down, thinking maybe it's not that far down. All right, let's test it. I'm about to leap. Talk me off the ledge.
No, you're right where you need to be. The more things change, the more things stay the same. Aaron, I don't know, was it somewhere in the middle of this 41 days where you had in your montage the female representative from I can't remember where, and she basically said, yeah, the reason we're doing this is because it's the only leverage we have?
Yes.
Am I right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Well, they're right. Now, why do they have that leverage?
I just got this on X from one of our listeners who's listening to us live. Just heard a self-employed couple say their health insurance went from $950 per month to $2,800 per month next year. 2 people. That's insane. It's not about politics. It's about pocketbooks we're going to lose. Well, again, we could have stopped this, but we chose not to. We chose not to repeal Obamacare when we had the chance. We chose not to do that. And so we own this issue. We own this issue now too. We own this issue now too because we didn't do that.
You bring up, secondly, you bring up a very important point about how we are whatever this coalition is, it rejects the other, but it isn't fundamentally have a core of aspiration that is dominating, and that's clear because and that void is why there's this civil war, whatever it is, going on the Republican Party, because it's more about, just like the left, we've got our own power and control thing going on here, and we aren't really about fundamental principles. Until we are, Steve, the ledge is where you're going to be more often than not. Right now, we just have the laugh track on where we think, look at how stupid that 2000 through 2004 was. And look how Biden was drooling on himself and AutoPen and this and that. And it's one big joke. It was evil is what it was. But because we're not good on our side, we aren't dealing in framing good versus evil. We're just saying that was a joke. We're not the joke. That's not going to be good enough. We will become the joke ourselves again because of what I started off saying. They know when it comes down to us, they can leverage us like this.
Yes. So it does seem you kind of got that inclination, and I got it as well over the weekend. And on some level, Trump, I saw a clip of him talking about how prices have come down on some goods, but, quote, I think this was the quote, I don't want to hear about affordability. Oh, gosh, that's not a good quote that you want that out there in the ether. But it seems like over the weekend, somebody's gotten in his ear and said, the changes we're doing not being felt, or at least we're concerned they're not being felt quite yet. That's why we have the spitballing going on, $2,000 tariff dividend checks or not, all of these things that I detailed in the montage. Here's the sad reality, though. Here's the sad reality along the lines of what Todd was saying, just on the issue of the housing market alone. What would be one thing within the power of the executive to bring down housing costs? Moratorium on H-1Bs. Deporting everybody who's here illegally. How much time does that take? A lot of time.
Yeah, how about a 50-year immigration moratorium instead of 50-year mortgages?
And you want to talk about repealing Obamacare, either in the first term or this term. You want to jack around with people's health insurance while they're already feeling like the cost of living is unaffordable. It's just, again, I'm not trying to make excuses for them because, they knew what they were getting into here. It's just an impossible situation because they are left with basically gridlock, unwilling senators in that chamber, a citizenry that is extremely fickle, extremely short-sighted. What I'm describing is not really much of a citizenry, but a peasantry. That's basically what it is. Let's just be honest here. We're all consenting adults. So we're just in a state, I believe, at least economically, where there is very little, I think, that can be done. I would like the American people to prove me wrong and to have some resolve and patience with getting this turned around. But I just don't see that happening, at least not right now.
It's the time of the judges.
Again, I don't feel right holding Trump to some uber standard of economic conservatism when this party has not had this standard despite its think tanks and best-selling books for most of any of our lifetimes, right?
Right.
Okay. So, and I don't blame him at all for being frustrated and like, okay, well, maybe it's the insurance companies, or let's, try to stretch out the mortgage payment so that they're less and more people can afford them. I don't blame him for trying things. To me, the only part of this that he ultimately bears the blame for is he's just endorsed too many rhinos in too many of these primaries. All right. But, when you see like what happened in the Pennsylvania and North Carolina's governor's race, where the more MAGA guy wins and then can't get it done, he could point out several of those kinds of candidates that couldn't get the job done on election day at the exact same time, right?
Yes.
We're just in a generational mess right now. And again, there's been a cost for all the cans we've kicked down the road, whether it's the education system, what we've talked about before, the state of the church, and now it's the state of the Republican Party as a whole. All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we are powered by ChristianCollegeGuide.com. It's a free, easy-to-use resource that does the work for you. If you're thinking about sending your kid to a Christian college, you want to make sure they're actually Christian, because there's a lot that claim to be, and we'll put them through the same struggle sessions that you would get at the public universities as well. That's where Christian College Guide comes in. All right, it's going to walk you through all the basic fundamentals you need to know, like acceptance rates, tuition cost, academic majors, etc. But the real reason you're thinking of sending your kid to a Christian college is you want to know what the spiritual life is like on campus. So they go through all of that with you as well. Campus policies, beliefs, all that. All right. And again, they do all of it for free, folks. This is the definitive guide to Christian higher education. And again, it's completely free. So if you or someone you know is considering a Christian college, go to ChristianCollegeGuide.com. Again, that's ChristianCollegeGuide.com. Create a free user profile. Get started today. That's ChristianCollegeGuide.com. Welcome in our good friend Bob Vander Plaats here from The Family Leader. I want to give you a quick chance to respond to what we were just talking about. I just walked through the series of unfortunate events with this shutdown over, and I'm trying to come up with what we accomplished here other than Democrats just got a shutdown and used it to get even more votes in an off-year election they were already going to win anyway. You can see the president is frustrated. If we're not going to suspend the filibuster, essentially any meaningful piece of legislation we try to pass between now and like next August, September, when they go home for the midterm campaign, will just simply not happen. So what are we doing? And, you know, there's some forces we're at the mercy of, right? We don't have, an American people that wants a substantially smaller government. So if we're not going to cut down the debt that's causing and the spending that's causing all our inflation, then we have to make ourselves wealthier. Last week, it looked very much to me like the Supreme Court was going to say the president does not have the current tariff power he has. So that takes a major negotiating leverage weapon off the table. You can kind of see, we saw this some in Trump's first term, too, when he got frustrated with the Republican Party, where he's just kind of just trying stuff at 3 a.m. now. Mm-hmm. All right, because I promise you they didn't workshop 50-year mortgages and let the banks and the property taxers at your bureaucrats have even more control over your residents. I doubt they workshopped that one for 6 months. That's my man just sitting there thinking, well, we got to get all this liquidity is just sitting in this housing market. We got to get this thing going. If we can't get the rate substantially down, if we made the payments that much cheaper, would it get more money into the economy? Right, we're just kind of trying stuff now, right? So talk me off the ledge here, Bob, because I haven't felt Vander Plaats since the day before Trump got shot last summer, but I'm feeling a little nostalgic for Vander Plaats again after the events of this entire whatever this was for 41 days.
Well, when you hear about this, the first thing that comes to mind is the games people play, and we watch games people played right out in front of us. And what happened was you had Tuesday night's election, last week Tuesday night, where the Democrats used it to their advantage. And obviously, if they were blue states, I get that, but we got crushed in blue states. And in New York City, that was not a good election by any way, shape, or form. I think the American people held the Republicans more to account than the Democrats to account for the government shutdown. And President Trump was right by saying, listen, guys, in the filibuster, reopen this government, but let's do it on our terms. And, Steve, the filibuster might have had a useful role in our history and in the institution of the U.S. Senate. This is not the country we live in anymore. So if you're not going to break the rules in the filibuster, let's get some things done. I guarantee you, as you say, it's no fun when the rabbit has the gun. The Democrats will end that filibuster. And they will make Puerto Rico a state. They will make D.C. a state. They will pack the U.S. Supreme Court. You have to show them there's a real difference here. And right now, they see that, listen, we had a little bit of a blue wave last week, Tuesday night. Go ahead, let's shut down the government now, or let's open up the government on our terms. Trump is exactly right. You guys are just handcuffing me like crazy here. I mean, if they understood you should not be talked off the ledge. If anything, the people in your districts, the constituents who are listening to this, they should be holding their elected officials to account on this stuff.
If anything, if you understood what time it was, you'd suspend the filibuster right now, pass everything you want, and then just put it back.
Yeah.
And then if you got to suspend it again to pass whatever you want, then do it again and put it back.
Yeah.
And turn around and accuse them of getting rid of the filibuster.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a war. Either we are at some form of cold civil war existentially for our way of life, or we're not. If we're not, by all means, somebody inform me because I'd be a hell of a lot wealthier. All right. Todd and Aaron get paid more money. The Blaze would be happier if that's not where we are. If that's not what time it is, then I'll just go back to doing Chuckle Hut GOP talking point, podcasting, and we'll just sit here and break down top marginal tax rates and polling and just be one unified uniparty unibrow puke. But other than if we are at existential war, then play to win. Do everything except that which the Word of God says you can't do. Do everything else. So get rid of the filibuster now. Pass everything you want. Yeah. Then put it right back.
You're seeing one guy who's playing to win, and that's President Trump. And that's why when you take a look at whether it's the war with Israel and Hamas, or the bombing of Iran, or tariffs, or Ukraine and Russia, or what he's doing with China, you're seeing him play to win for America and America's interests. But as soon as the ball gets passed over to, hey, I need now some assistance from you guys, it drops the ball. It just blows. So you can see why he is frustrated. This would be like Michael Jordan being the GOAT saying, listen, I'm the greatest of all time. But Scottie Pippen, I need you to do something. B.J. Armstrong, I need you to set a pick or at least pass me the ball at the right time. We need to be a team here. And I think what Trump is saying, why he's frustrated, guys, we saw this. I was out of office for 4 years. I'm coming in to do the American people a real solid here, and you're the ones blocking me. And that's why he's upset. And what Marjorie Greene said, and you guys know I don't ever bring up Marjorie Greene's name.
Now, is this before she said Nancy Pelosi was a great leader?
No.
Before she said we actually need some amnesty because somehow there's not enough American men who want to do the construction jobs in the state of Georgia where she resides.
What you said there, and I thought, that's exactly the America I'm traveling. You have a government shutdown, but you're still paying yourself. You have a government shutdown, but you now are not going to work. You're back home in your districts. It's kind of like, is there leadership here at all? But she was actually holding Congress to account. So I can see what Trump is saying as well, like, you need some leadership in D.C., and we're not getting. This does not help us, Steve, does not help us at all when it comes to the midterm elections.
I can't think of a worse idea in our home state based on the conversation we just had. I cannot think of a worse or dumber idea than saying, that's exactly why we should run a member of Congress for governor statewide. I can't think of, just based off the last 42 minutes of conversation we've had about the government shutdown. First of all, where the hell has Randy Feenstra been for 41 days, Bob? All right? In fact, I'm going to hold you responsible to tell us, because by his own admission, he wouldn't be a congressman without your endorsement. So tell me, where would he be where has he been for 41 days when there was no shutdown? Why wasn't he all over the state? Was he in your offices? Did he come in to meet you guys and see your team? No. I mean, where's he been?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things here. Number one is the governorship is very important, not just of the state of Iowa, but to every state in the country. And we saw what a rock-solid governor does for the state of Iowa and Kim Reynolds. And now we need to pass off the baton effectively to who's going to be the champion to be that next governor. And I've been very open about this. We've run congressmen for governor before in the state of Iowa in conditions where you think, no, they should win, and they got beat. Congressman Jim Ross Lightfoot ushered in Tom Vilsack. Congressman Jim Nussle ushered in, of all people, Chet Culver. We just don't elect congressmen in Iowa. But if Randy believes he's called to be the next governor of the state of Iowa, he then, to your point, Steve, he needs to get out about and make his case and show why what he's done in Congress would be effective for what you're doing to be the governor of Iowa. And as you and I have talked about before, it's not so much if it's Governor Feenstra that we have the concern about, it's the candidate. Can you win? And I'm telling you what, if you don't show up, then you're not going to get the votes. There's some telling signs here. We talked about the Iowa State Fair straw poll.
Right. I was going to mention this. The Iowa Standard is one of our popular kind of conservative counters, to the Des Moines Register op-ed page. They're doing an online poll. They've had over 2,000 people vote in this in the last week. He's in 5th place. Now, who are the people voting in this? Again, it's not a scientific poll, but that goes to our point. These are your activists.
Sure.
These are the people that are actually paying attention right now. These are the people that will go to the mattresses on moments when you're down, like right now. These are the people that carry your water for you. Moments when you sound the shofar and say we have to go to war. These are the people that crawl over broken glass for you. He's in 5th place.
Yep. And let me be clear here. You've endorsed Adam Steen last week. we have not endorsed, and we don't plan to endorse for quite a while. We want to let this thing play out to see what's going to happen here. However, from a guy who's run for governor before, I took every straw poll serious. And the reason is, do you have grassroots support or don't you have grassroots support? Are you winning in Story County, Polk County, these different area counties? And we won every straw poll that there was. So to me, it is a sign, because if these people are not motivated by your candidacy in the primary, will they be motivated by your candidacy if you're the candidate in the general election? And right now, I think most betting odds would still have him at 75, 80% that he would be the nominee. He's got the money. He's got the establishment endorsements, those types of things. But you have to resonate with the grassroots. And that means you need to show up. You need to have the conversation. You need to play to win, not just for you, but for the state of Iowa.
Right now, we have no idea what kind of economic record we're going to have to run on. We have no way of knowing. We don't know if another single piece of meaningful legislation will be passed that our base cares about between now and next November. What we also know is the other guy, he's already established a foothold. Rob Sand is not a bad candidate. I mean, I know that I know I'm supposed to generate memes and crowd pleasers. The guy managed to win statewide in the reddest Iowa that has literally ever existed. He is a good politician.
And money is not going to be an object.
And that's one of the reasons why he's a good politician.
So the other thing, Steve, let me give you another anecdote for your audience about why we should be at least having a yellow flag, cautionary flag up. The TSA people, I travel a ton. I'm on airplanes a lot. I'm on an airplane again tomorrow. But the TSA people are saying, listen, the people have just been wonderful to us. Why? Because we're showing up to work. And so the passengers, the customers, they're being wonderful. She said, however, the passengers and the customers that we talk to, they are furious at Congress, because they're not showing leadership and they're getting paid for it, and they're seeing TSA agents and air traffic control that's not being paid, putting everybody's flight at risk or delayed or canceled. This resonates with the American people, and that's what you need to pay attention to, and that's why Randy needs to get out. I know he's doing a launch event tonight, but now you need to get out and you need to sell why you're the best candidate for this job.
The other factor, too, is we have a different Democrat than before. This guy loves spreading his heterodoxies about Christianity everywhere you go on a daily basis.
Without question.
And so the idea that you're just going to be able to not have to respond to that or describe that, I mean, is Randy Feenstra ready on a debate stage for this time next year when Rob Sand says you're a heretic and you're the one who's actually violating Jesus' teachings and principles? Is he ready for that?
That's a question that he needs to do as well.
Because all Rob Sand needs to do is convince 4 to 5% of our base to not show up based on Randy's terrible answer to that, and he's probably going to win. Okay.
And you know what makes you better, Steve?
Running in a primary.
Well, competition.
Yeah.
Competition, debating one another. So when he says, I don't know if I'm going to debate the other Republicans, that's a sign as well, because the debates will make you better so that when you go up against a Rob Sand, you're prepared for this. Rob Sand is going to talk about going to church every Sunday, why he's a hunter, he carries guns. He wants to be as Republican can be while running on a very progressive Democrat platform.
I wasn't going to bring up Adam. You brought him up. I absolutely think Adam's the best candidate, which is why I endorsed him. But at this point, I don't care if our nominee is IP Freely. We cannot let the Iowa Democratic Party out of its grave.
Well, that's
but I can just see, I've seen this chain of events play out so many times doing this 20 years full time, and that's always how this ends every single time.
And I guess, Steve, what I'm looking at, too, because, again, I was around when Congressman Nussel was our nominee. I was around the donors. I was around the other people. They have some of the same concerns that we have right now. So let's let this primary play out. Let's have the cream rise to the top. I think you're right. Winning, we have to win in 2026. And Tuesday's blue wave or blue shock, whatever you want to call that thing, that should be a wake-up call to us all.
All right, let's try to close the hour on a high note, because this has been one of the more somber hours we've done here in quite a while on the show. We got about 3 minutes here. You did manage to somehow navigate the current airline situation to get back from Phoenix here over the weekend. I know you had a chance to go see a Freedom Night out there in Phoenix on your own, and meet Lucas Miles and see TPUSA Faith in action. Just kind of give us your, what your observations on what you saw. I
got to tell you, guys, my heart goes out to TPUSA Faith, and being there in person and even seeing, the scatterings of the memorial yet in regards to, people's sincere sympathy for what happened. And to see young people have to see a leader go out the way Charlie went out, assassinated, martyred, and murdered. But to see that they're still carrying the torch. Lucas Miles and the team at TPUSA Faith, they could have not treated me better. They've had an explosion in the number of churches connecting with TPUSA Faith. I think he said it's doubled from 4,000 to 8,000 now across the country. I told him, and I told his team as well, we want to come alongside with an open hand. How can we raise up your arms? How can we synergize with one another to have maximum impact for the kingdom? And then hopefully for earthly good as well, whether it be elections, policy, or partnership. But Steve, I know that Lucas. You did Freedom Night with Charlie back in June.
Mm-hmm.
So I got a chance to see Freedom Night with Lucas and Greg Laurie this past Wednesday night. But Lucas is a solid guy. I mean, he knows his theology. He knows his Bible. And he's also a very gifted communicator who does it in a winsome way. As I told Lucas, I said, this might not have been on your bingo card to be the president of TPUSA Faith, especially TPUSA Faith, and then Charlie gets taken out. I said, but I really believe God's raised you up for such a time as this. He's very gifted. He's very talented. Look forward to ways that we can champion one another in the harvest field, because that's what we're supposed to do as believers anyhow.
Guys, you have any reaction to the conversation Bob and I just had here in the final minute before we say goodbye?
Well, Ainsley happened to meet Lucas Miles this weekend as well in Arkansas and had a very similar impression about not only him, but the events that he's part of. So that's put that in opposition to a guy like still, after we've seen Donald Trump, Charlie Kirk, Randy Feenstra still thinks he doesn't owe the people getting in the ring. It's one I understand not giving in an endorsement, but the entire Republican Party, no matter who they are, needs to say, that's unacceptable. Yeah. What do you owe us? We owe you absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
And he thinks after all this time in Congress that somehow he walks on water. No, you don't, Randy.
Yeah. I think what Charlie gets and what I think Trump gets, and this is not about
30 seconds.
This is not about a party. This is about the people. This is about the people of Iowa. This is about the people of this country. And that's why Trump's going to battle every day and saying, guys, give me the tools so I can be successful for the American people. And that's what you want in a governor to champion as well. Cheers, though, to TPUSA and TPUSA Faith.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you.
Hour 2 is next. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I am Steve Deace. He's Todd Erzin, and he's Auron MacIntyre. And we are brought to you by our friends over at Moxie Pest Services. You know, they are celebrating their silver anniversary. And as the weather turns colder, you might notice some changes. The leaves, the crisp mornings, those things are nice. Unfortunately, though, the pests notice these things too. And this is the time of year when those mice, spiders, and all kinds of bugs, they start looking for a way to get inside for shelter. And once they're in, it can be very difficult to deal with that on your own. You can't just spray and leave. There's more to it than that. And Moxie knows that. That's why they've been around for 25 years. And they're so confident that if you try them, you're going to want to keep them around. That they're offering you your very first pest control service for just $25, $1 for every year they've been in business. You cannot beat that. That's practically giving it away. All right, so if you want to try it today and help them celebrate 25 years in business, and they're so confident you'll come back for more, they're giving you that first attempt for just $25 at moxieservices.com/Steve, MOXIE. Use the promo code Steve to get $25 for your first pest control service at moxieservices.com/Steve. Also, don't forget to let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox. Lots of different ways you can do that. Email the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. You can also find me on the new YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube. If you would please subscribe to that, at Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, if you're a podcast listener, thank you. You're the biggest chunk of our audience. Please, if you would mind letting others know how much you love the show by leaving us a 5-star review. Tens of thousands of you have left us those reviews. We appreciate them all. Let's keep it going. You can also hit subscribe, or if you listen via Apple iTunes, follow. And that's how you're going to know for sure that every time we do a new episode, it's for sure in your podcast feed. Even more of you have done that for us. So thank you very much. And let's keep that going as well. But one of the things I think we need to get going on our side is a real dialogue and real debate. And oftentimes, there's this notion today that I just completely reject, that we're arguing more than ever before. I would actually argue the opposite. I think we're arguing less. I think we are trolling more than ever before. I think we are demagoguing more than ever before. But I really don't believe we're debating and arguing, dialoguing as we ever have before. In fact, we're doing it, I think, even less. And there's this balance we all feel, and I violate it myself, believe me, that we are in an industry here where, the ability to quick draw, respond, and react is required because of how many of you, acquire our content. And it is via social media. And that is not a place for nuance and pontification. All right. So events of the last few weeks has sparked, and really over the last couple of years, with the introduction of this term woke right, has sparked a lot of internal discussion and debate on our side. And I was texting about this with our friend and colleague Auron MacIntyre last week, and said, hey, why don't you come on for an hour and let's see if we can, kind of hash some of this out. We agree on a lot. We disagree on a few things, and see if, with the audience, we can make everybody smarter. And he even responded back to me, I kind of feel like if the two of us can't do this, maybe it just can't be done. And I hope that's not the case. I fear it might be. All right. So let's bring Auron on. It is good to see you again, my friend. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks for having me again.
So really appreciate you doing this. And I've got a structure for the most of this hour, but I want to lead off with just kind of an icebreaker question, if you're okay with this. Because it's a term that gets thrown around a lot, and I thought I originally knew what it meant. But now it seems to me the term woke right over the last several months has just kind of come to mean, if you will not follow the traditional Republican Party methodology of surrendering now before it is too late, you are now woke right? But yet I'm sure there are some reasons why people that coined that phrase have serious concerns. It's just the whole thing has been completely lost. I don't know what it means. You often, I've been both a Zionist cuck and woke right pretty much every week for the last 9 months. All right, in my feed. All right. So you are one of those who is frequently given the charge of woke right. Right. As best as you understand it, what do you think the term means?
I think it means enemy. So the funny thing about people who have been pushing the term woke right, one of the key things that they've centered on is the fact that those of us who recognize what time it is, what kind of politics, unfortunately, whether we like it or not, that we are currently kind of our political moment is one of friend and enemy. There's a friend-enemy distinction. They really hate this because the idea comes from a man named Carl Schmitt, who was totally, admittedly, a member of the National Socialist Party. It is not a good thing. It's a bad thing. Nazis are bad. Carl Schmitt is bad for being a Nazi at some point in his career. Unfortunately, just like, making rockets that get us to the moon, sometimes Germans were right, even if they happen to have been part of the National Socialist Party at some point. And Carl Schmitt is right about friend-enemy politics. And you can tell he's right because even the people who hate him and hate the idea of it designed a term directly to create a friend-enemy distinction. If you're on the woke right, you're not on the real right. You're not a friend, you're an enemy. Now, you can say it just applies to Israel, and I would say that that is the most consistent way that it is applied. However, I think there are people like Auron MacIntyre himself, obviously an ardent Jewish nationalist, who has been labeled woke right. So you can't just say that it's along the lines of Israel. I would say that probably the most accurate term is the one that you have laid out, that ultimately it is people who are interested in winning, people who are interested in taking conservatism and saying, actually, it should conserve people. It should conserve nations. And therefore, it's not about some abstract ideology. And it means that we actually have to shift and change with what is good for people and not just hold to some abstract idea of how the economy should work or, what GDP should go up. And this is what I think is really ultimately the deciding factor. It really is a term that is meant to be a thought terminating cliche. Many of the people in the quote unquote woke right don't even come close to agreeing with each other, and yet they are labeled together because the whole point is to create this enemy faction.
So here's what I want to do then. I want to give you a chance to define what you think and why. All right. And I think the best way to do that is last week after the election results and in honor of Reformation Day, I put out kind of 25 theses on social media about where we are on our side and what I think are warning signs heading into a midterm next year, which if we lose, the Trump presidency is pretty stillborn from that time forward. And so we can't afford to lose. We just can't. Okay. We have to win. And I'm just going to walk through these briefly individually, and I'm going to give you the floor to react and respond. You can agree, disagree, question, comment, insult, because I want the audience to hear, most of all, what you think and why. And then if we have time at the end, if there's a couple things I want to clarify or push back on, I'll do that. But the most important thing for me, because it's the Steve Deace Show, brother, so I always get the last word. Today, tomorrow, or the next day. All right? So the most important thing for me is for them to hear what you think and why. Okay? And away from the quick fire world of social media in which we all live. All right? So let's start with point number one, looking at the Virginia election results. And I talked about the suburbs. Noted how many federal workers have moved into Northern Virginia since the explosion of government, starting with the Bush guns and butter days, greatly expanded under Obama, frankly, continued much under Trump, and had just exploded, weapon of mass destruction under Biden. But then I noted two cultural problems in a huge suburban state. Number one, that a lot of our so-called suburban megachurches that have taken a generation off of discipleship have greatly watered down the moral, pardon the expression, bulwark in these communities. And so when you bring in factor number two, at the same time, the universities are more openly and brazenly Marxist than ever before. And the more college educated you are, the more you tend to vote Democrat. There's two things right away that'll tell me how you're going to vote: marital status and how many college degrees you have. Those are the two biggest markers we have in terms of demographics voting in America right now. And so we've got all these people with graduate degrees and everything else that have been fully indoctrinated Marxists moving into the suburbs at the same time that the churches in those communities have really watered themselves down. So there's a lot less resistance to moving the suburbs to the left. And I think without a very strong economic message to counter that, I just don't think we can win in the suburbs. Your thoughts on that?
Yep, totally agree there. Nothing for us to disagree at all on.
All right. I think then my second point was, if you look at what Mamdani did in New York City and how he did it, then I think we're not having political campaigns anymore as much as we're having rival evangelistic campaigns. Almost like if, Billy Graham went to your, foreign country and the local sheikh or caliph held a rival, evangelistic crusade just down the street with a completely different message, but a lot of the same methodology. And that I think that we need candidates now that understand this, that we're not selling widgets or making technocratic propositions, but we have to speak to something higher than those ideals. And Mamdani did, I would argue, with a godless, demonic, aberrant religion and worldview, but he did it nevertheless.
So I'd say two things on that. First, ultimately, you're absolutely correct that this is a more intense political battle. To the point where you're seeing as a theological battle. My point would be that simply all political battles are theological battles. And what we did for a long time was pretend that all we had between us was like small differences on the marginal tax rate and maybe, how long someone should be able to apply for, unemployment or something like that. But the differences in American politics have been growing exponentially for a long time. We've separated into multiple cultures that just have nothing to do with each other. And this is what real politics is. This is why real politics is friend-enemy. Sorry, but real politics is not a bunch of people getting around to decide whether or not you increase the funding for the next fire board, meeting. Real politics is existential. we've been very lucky in this country for a long time to have a version of it that was not. But to be clear, that's what politics really is at the end of the day. So I think what we're really just recognizing is not a new breed of politics. What we're returning to is an old breed. We might not like that, but it is the most consistent and real version of politics that really exists along the historical spectrum. The second part of this, I would say, is that while I do think ultimately you're correct that there is a battle of faiths here, a battle of true worldviews, I think also there is a demographic battle. When you look at Mamdani and he spoke about who his winning coalition was, right? He said, "Oh, it's the aunties from Trinidad and Tobago, and it's the cab drivers from Senegal, and it's the guy who owns the corner store from, I don't know, Guatemala or something." He listed a ton of different people. You know who he didn't say one time in there? Americans, because he doesn't lead the coalition of Americans, because the people who vote for him aren't Americans, and he knows it. They're paperwork Americans, but the real coalition for Mamdani is third worldists who are raiding your country and taking your stuff through the ballot box. And he knows it, and he says it out loud in his victory speech. And there's no ideology that solves that problem. Look, all these people from the third world, they don't share the same religion. They don't share the same culture. They don't share the same worldview. They don't even share the Marxism. They don't believe any of that stuff. I mean, maybe some of them do, but that's not what binds them together. That's not the binding ideology. The binding ideology is dismantling America and picking over its corpse. And so to some extent, this is a battle of ideology, but even if we destroy the Marxist argument with facts and logic tomorrow, that doesn't solve our problem. The problem is demographics. We're moving people into America who aren't American, and they're voting to steal everything. That's kind of it.
All right. Next, number 4. I think for us to win, the first step to winning any election is you have to turn out your own base, which means you have to know who your base is. And I think the era of the traditional, well, this is the Christian conservative base, the Grover Norquist low tax base, this is the law and order base, this is the defense hawk base. I think that's over. And I think our coalition now is the MAGA coalition. That is our base. And so that means we have to message differently, right? If I was running in any of those lanes in a primary 20 years ago, I'd say I would speak and communicate differently to a Grover Norquist breakfast on low taxes and regulation than I would if I was speaking at the national religious broadcasters, for example. All right, because I want that base of people to know I am with them. I communicate on their wavelength and use their language. And I think we need candidates who understand who their base is now. It is the MAGA coalition. You have to speak to that. If you cannot speak to that, you're going to end up like Winsome Sears, where you only got 60% of the Trump vote in Loudoun County, and that's how you got routed statewide. You have to absolutely be able to speak to that. And I think going back to what I said previously, I think even when we talk about economic matters, we have to speak to the soul, that we're even pursuing a different economic theory because it produces a different way of life, a different heritage, that it actually speaks to something higher than something purely transactional.
I think that's absolutely correct. And I think the biggest thing conservatives need to recognize, especially the Republican Party, is that's not their base. They don't own it. It's Trump's base, which is why the base comes out for Trump and comes out for candidates Trump endorses, and they don't really come out for a lot of the standard Republican stuff. And they certainly don't come out for people who reject him, tell him to stay home, think they're going to do better ultimately with the traditional Republican coalition if Trump isn't there to muddy the waters with his speech. It's Trump's base. A lot of people said ultimately they were terrified. A lot of people who now pretend that they like Trump said for a long time that they were terrified that Trump would turn the conservative movement into a cult of personality. Well, it is. And that's why it changed. And you can't win in the old conservative paradigm. It simply doesn't work anymore.
All right. That brings us then one more broad point. I think before we get into the stuff with Tucker, Fuentes, and the fault line that has opened up there, I think it's important to address why this fault line even exists. And I tried to do that. We have an entire generation of males right now who really don't know what it means to be men. We have skipped men, a generation of men in the home, figuratively or literally. We skipped a generation of men in our pulpits. Those are your primary role models for young men. A lot of young men don't know how to exercise their God-given dominion and headship, or even what those things even mean. I think they are angry. I have an 18-year-old young man in my own home. I'm launching him as we speak into the adult world. He's learning. All right. My two choices were go, get a whole bunch of student loan debt, 6-7 figures of student loan debt to be a gay race communist, or get into the workforce. And if I can't make $35,000 a year, I can't get an apartment and a car that, I wouldn't be ashamed to pick up a girl in. So I believe me, we're having these existential conversations. Me and him are every day. So I feel this every day. I can anecdotally know it. But as a father of one of these young men, I am having these internal conversations every day. And what we have said to them, particularly our white young men, is that the mortal damage permitted to our heritage and way of life by the last generation, that's now in your lap to fix, okay? And as a result, they would like a generational reckoning. They would like things greatly reassessed as to how we got here. Stuff like 41, the oldest age ever, is now the median age of an American home buyer, things of that nature. And I think that they are worthy and deserve that reckoning. I think attempts by the older generation to step in and stymie it are probably just going to make them even more suspicious and push them more into the sectors of the culture that the older generation is currently afraid of than ever before.
I think that's right. I think that while, as conservatives, as people on the right, we recognize that ultimately we need strong men. We need men who can lead. We know that there is a certain level of, pushing a man to succeed on his own, to forge his own way, that is necessary. So the tough love is a thing that conservatives like to deliver. And to be fair, there is some level of that's required. But also, you can't look at people who have been told their entire lives that they need to be shoved to the back of the bus because they have so much privilege that they are just going to, they need to be handicapped, and that's justified, and that's okay for the entire culture to hate them and sneer at them and tell them that they're the reason everything in the world is bad and wrong and evil. And simultaneously, we need to make sure that they can't go to college. We need to make sure that it's harder for them to get jobs. We need to make sure that it's more difficult for them to have homes, to have families, all while simultaneously telling them, well, just pull yourself up by your bootstraps, just get it together. And that can't be the answer. Again, it's not that you shouldn't encourage young men to work hard and forge their own way, but you can't look at a world where you have specifically inverted all the incentives against them and then lecture them about why they aren't succeeding, especially when even the people who recognize this problem still have a hard time, honestly, speaking about young men's issues. They'll acknowledge that they have them, but the minute that they say, well, maybe we should change something. Maybe women have to approach things differently. Maybe the church has to approach things differently. All of a sudden, it's no. We can't change any of the systems that have put you here. Well, we'll acknowledge that's a problem, but the minute you actually try to change something, or you suggest that there might be an issue that other people have to move on, well, then no, that's where the misogyny comes in, and now we can't work with it. It's a very real problem, and you're right. There's a justifiable reason why these guys are looking for an answer and might find it in places that we would prefer they don't.
All right, another group that's trying to change things, our friends over at Patriot Mobile. We'll get back to Auron here in a minute. Patriot Mobile has been a leader in the red parallel economy while providing the same or even better premium access to all the major U.S. networks than you'll get from anyone else, including some of the very communist corporations out there that hate you. So you don't have to sacrifice quality for your values at all. Take it from me, our family, we have been Patriot Mobile customers. Our entire family has for more than 5 years now and have never looked back. They've got an outstanding U.S.-based customer service team. You may think, I can't make the switch right now. I'm locked into a terrible deal. They've got a contract buyout program as well. And if you can make the switch, keep your number, switch your number, keep your phone, upgrade your phone. They'll customize it as best they can for you and your family while supporting the same values that you do as well. I've seen it firsthand. When I speak around the country, often Patriot Mobile, one of the sponsors of that event. All right, so use the promo code Steve to get started with a free month of service today. That's patriotmobile.com/Steve is where you can go. Use the promo code Steve. You'll get started with a free month of service today from Patriot Mobile at patriotmobile.com/Steve. All right, now that we've addressed, Auron, the metas of this, and you and I have a lot of agreement on this so far, let's get into some of the specific players that exposed this fault line about a week or two ago. I'm just going to read you verbatim what I said about Nick Fuentes so I don't summarize anything and just let you respond, all right? Nick Fuentes is a malignant satanic force and barring sincere repentance and regeneration offers nothing of value. Like his true father, his native tongue is slander and accusation and often by the cruelest and most vile means possible. We are more than capable of addressing the justifiable concerns of our young men without creating our own Louis Farrakhan. If Nick Fuentes is permitted to be mainstreamed on our side, it will end up irredeemably splitting our coalition to render us politically impotent, as well as cause much of our donor and advertising base to eject rather than take on his baggage in an increasingly politicized marketplace.
So I'll just say up front that Nick Fuentes is somebody who has not been kind to me. There's no love lost there. This is a guy who has maliciously lied about me multiple times. He has, supported the work of a woman who was calling for harm on my family. This is not someone I have any sympathy for. I think he's ultimately a bad role model. However, I would say I would be careful of saying things like this guy is a satanic force. Again, not because he's not a bad influence, but because ultimately this guy is a shock jock, right? Like, he loves Stalin and Hitler. What a surprise, right? Like, it's just saying the most edgy thing that gets you riled up. And he'll say this openly. You can watch him say it. I'm making these jokes because I know they make you react exactly this way. He's not a political leader. He's Howard Stern. And when you treat him like he's some kind of revolutionary evil, then you kind of grant him a level of seriousness that I don't think should exist around the guy. It doesn't mean you can't point out it's wrong. He's wrong. It doesn't mean you can't point out he's gross. It just means maybe don't treat him like Voldemort, right? Like, don't give him the level of seriousness that elevates him to leadership status. Second, I would say that it's not about having him on your side or not. What you have to recognize, and this is really serious, and every time I say this to people, they kind of blow past it, but it's really important. Nick Fuentes has been canceled off like everything you can imagine. And he still has one of the largest audiences out there of any political pundit at this point, really, but especially in the younger cohort and especially young men. And that doesn't happen for no reason. Unless your answer is, I don't want any of those young men in my coalition, then you at the very least need to speak to what he is speaking about. You need to understand why they're there. And really, to say that we can speak on those things without someone like Nick, I agree, we don't need Nick, but saying we're really good at speaking on these issues, or we can even speak on these issues without doing whatever he's doing, well, we haven't. So if we're gonna say that, we should put our money where our mouth is. The way to beat Nick Fuentes is to be better at addressing the issues he's addressing than he is. And we are not, just obviously. That is apparent. So again, I agree with a lot of the, this guy is not a good influence. We don't want him influencing people. He shouldn't be a leader. But just saying that is not enough. We need to walk the walk, and we are not walking it at all.
On the Tucker role on this, and I've got about 5 minutes before the break, so I'll try to summarize what I wrote as much as I possibly can. That ultimately, it's not just that Tucker interviewed him, but the way that he treated him, which is in clear contrast to the combative interview he had with Ted Cruz that caused a lot of alarm with people. If you're concerned that we talked about this last week rather than Arctic frost, well, Tucker largely has the biggest platform on our entire side. He could have talked about Arctic frost. He chose not to, like all week long. All right. And so we talked about this instead. And if you're going to treat some member of your own side, hey, I don't agree with Ted Cruz on everything these days either. All right. I just told his team 2 weeks ago that I can't see anybody beating J.D. Vance for the nomination when they came to me about him running for president. But I also cannot fathom a world where you are less skeptical of Nick Fuentes in a personal setting, especially when the guy insulted your own dad, than you are Ted Cruz. And I can completely understand why lots of people were alarmed by that. On the other hand, though, Tucker also, I think, is responsible for the most important and impactful body of work that's been produced by anyone on our side here over the last 8 years. So that's what I said about Tucker. Your thoughts on that?
I mean, didn't Donald Trump insult Ted Cruz's wife?
I worked on the campaign when that happened. Yes, I remember it very well. Yes.
So, and not only does he talk to President Trump, he pretends to like and approve of President Trump. So I don't know. Actually, that seems like something we do all the time. Look, I looking at I understand what people wanted. First, if Tucker had gotten on there and treated Nick Fuentes the way that he had treated Cruz, people would still be angry at Tucker. They were angry at Tucker for reading the Bible at Charlie Kirk's funeral. They were going to call him an anti-Semite no matter what he did, for having Nick Fuentes on. Is it a little easier to criticize him because he didn't strike exactly that tone? Yes, but let's not pretend they wouldn't have flipped their lid either way. Second, when you look at the way he approached this, it's very clear that what he was trying to do, the dynamic he was setting forth is, hey man, I want you to understand that the way you are going about, he's basically Tucker saying, I criticize Israel too, but I don't do it from a point of collective guilt. You shouldn't hate Jewish people. You shouldn't talk about women the way you do. Tucker pushed back on him on several levels, and people kind of pretend he didn't because he didn't scream at him while doing it. But his whole point, I think, was to give Fuentes a way to express these opinions without radicalizing, without going to the darkest versions of these, without taking them to places they should not go. And I think that was what he was trying to lay out to Fuentes. He was trying to say, this is a Christian way to approach this. This is the honorable way to approach this. The way you have been going about it is wrong. I still have these issues. I'm not going to pretend these issues go away because we're Christian and because we need to address each other with love. But this is the way you should do it, not the way you've been doing it. Now, I personally would have pushed Fuentes further. I think there are questions that had nothing to do with Israel that Tucker should have been asking. He should have been asking why Fuentes spoke about Erica Kirk the way that he did. I think there are reasonable allegations around Fuentes's operation about people who have been involved in sexual grooming or possibly even abuse. Now, maybe those charges are wrong, but they would have been relevant, and I would have brought those up, and they wouldn't have anything to do with Israel. But the people who are criticizing this interview can't even touch those because all they care about really is about the whole Israeli thing. So I understand why people are talking about the tone of that particular interview, but as Tucker said, well, you do your own interview. You bring Nick Fuentes on and scream at him and see how far that gets you. It'll be cathartic for you and the people who ultimately see him squash, but if the point is to go to Nick Fuentes' audience and say, hey, there's another way, a more responsible way to consider these issues, well, getting on there and just trying to scream at him doesn't seem like the way to win those people over. Maybe that's not your goal. Maybe the goal is just to flay him for blood, for the blood sport of the, you know, in the gladiatorial combat. Maybe that's all we really wanted. But if you were actually interested in his influence on young men, then you kind of have to talk to the young men, and the way you talk to them matters. Another hectoring lecture on this issue isn't really compelling to them, but someone who's listening and commenting and saying there's a better way to do this, they might be.
All right, folks, when we come back, we're going to get into the narrative, false choices, the Jewish reaction, the heritage controversy. We'll get to as many of these things as we possibly can with Auron MacIntyre when we return. Stay tuned. Folks, our friends at Preborn just want to say thank you for your generosity. Over the course of this year, over the course of the last several years, you've helped them to save literally tens of thousands of babies, and I would argue maybe the souls of their mamas as well, because as we have seen play out politically in America, it does something to the conscience, minus the grace of Christ. It tends to do something to sear the conscience of a woman rather than confronting the magnitude of what it means to have murdered her own child and seek out grace and forgiveness for it. She can go the other way, sear her conscience, and just vote repeatedly to essentially doom our civilization. Because what I just described is much of the Democrat base. So if you want to help Preborn continue to fight literal soul-to-soul combat, where they're there for the baby, they confront the mom with an ultrasound to convince her not to commit murder. But then when she steps away from the darkness and into the light, they are there to support her as well, sometimes for up to 2 years after the baby is born. All of this is free of charge, but none of it's free. And that's where you and I come in. Make a tax-deductible donation today to the 5-star charity Preborn when you go to preborn.com/Steve. Again, head to preborn.com/Steve. Easy to remember, preborn.com/Steve. All right. Let's welcome back our friend and colleague Auron MacIntyre here, as we are trying to come now and let us reason together, as the prophet Isaiah said. All right, so on the aftermath of this interview, all right, one of the fault lines, one of the sub-fault lines that developed was over at the Heritage Foundation. I've known Kevin Roberts for years. Kevin just brought me out to speak to a town hall of the entire Heritage staff in the days after Charlie's murder. He is one of the finest salt of the earth patriots that I know. Any attempt to have labeled him an anti-Semite prior to this episode, and this is the video where he originally stuck up for Tucker in the interview, any attempt to label him an anti-Semite a week before this event would have been dismissed as nutty. Heritage, under his leadership, in fact, has done valiant work in pushing back on anti-Semitism. I think you are free to have criticized the interview all that you want, but overall, it is vital that a venerable institution like the Heritage Foundation equip itself for the battles we face now, not yesterday's battles. And I think some in and around the organization want to turn the tide back to 2005, and we're using Kevin's original video statement as a means, and the ensuing controversy as a means of furthering that agenda.
Yeah, I think that's largely correct. We could see the constant struggle session behavior, frankly, from people who supported Israel in this scenario. All the things we were told that we needed to denounce, all the things we needed to walk away from, all the behavior that was not acceptable on college campuses from the left, we all saw it manifest itself. This was nothing but an HR struggle session through and through. To the point where Kevin Roberts just sits there and gets berated by these people, has his character assassinated publicly. If you had hung a sign on him, talk about how, what a dirty kulak he was, we wouldn't have been able to notice the difference. And this is all coming from a bunch of people who have told me that the woke right doesn't have any principles. We need to be principled. It's all about principle. Well, actually, they have no principles. When it comes to the issue they care about, they're willing to engage in exactly this behavior with zero shame about it. And remember, it's not just Kevin Roberts there. We had another young man who ended up being forced out, who was attacked. He was called an anti-Semite because he was a Catholic who didn't want to attend a Shabbat dinner that now apparently Heritage is putting on. And he said, oh, well, it's not required, but it's literally at the end of a list of demands by the anti-Semitism board. And the guy was just clarifying and saying, hey, to be clear, like, we're not going to, it's not going to be the scenarios where, of course, you're not required to come to the party council, comrade, but you, as a good communist, you'd want to be there, right? Like, we're trying to make sure that he doesn't have to do this. And for this, his character was assassinated. He was called an anti-Semite. He was attacked. And this was not a public conversation. That video that was leaked was a private conversation. So this is just religious persecution. That's really all there is to it. And he was exactly right to assume that if he in any way had questions, even questions about attending such a event, he would have his character destroyed. And it was. And it's very clear, and I think this is a deeper part that we need to get into, and you kind of hinted at here, so I guess now's the time to do it. It's, Sean Davis of The Federalist has said, all of this is just a proxy war on J.D. Vance. All of this is just a attempt to make sure that as soon as Trump is out the door, MAGA is skin-suited and returned back to neocon standards. And I think if you look at the Twitter feed of a guy like Max Abrams, that's just obviously true. Like, he's basically just admitting out loud, yeah, this is a war on J.D. Vance and real MAGA. And we're going to knock these people out, and we're going back to Mitt Romney. That's what's going to happen. And that's really what this is here. The Tucker thing, the purity spiral, the Heritage purity spiral, it's all just, how do we get rid of MAGA? How do we get rid of Project 2025 conservatism and go back to, whatever, right? Go back to John McCain. That really is ultimately the goal here.
Well, you skipped ahead because that was actually coming up a little bit later on. So we don't have to do that one now. That's all right, because I absolutely do believe some of this is a proxy for 2028. I don't disagree with that at all. So I was going to bring that up as well. All right. On the Jewish reaction to the Tucker Fuentes interview. Again, I'm just going to share with you exactly what I wrote and then let you respond. Our conservative Jewish friends have every right to be skittish about at least some of the conversations taking place, given where history shows they have all too often sadly led. I will oppose mainstreaming the likes of Fuentes and any impersonators, as well as anti-Semitism down to the last molecule. Your reaction, your response.
I mean, look, I don't think that we should hate anyone due to their ethnicity. This, of course, is true to Jewish people as it is to black people, as it is to white people. But the reason that this is so difficult to get lathered up about, really, ultimately, is that none of these people cared for decades when anti-white racism was basically the core of our culture. and not just something that got knocked around by the radical left, but something that was literally taught in our universities, became the selection process for our corporations, and honestly was pushed inside the Republican Party. I don't know if you saw, I'm trying to remember that guy's name, Rob something or other, but he went on this huge diatribe that ultimately, no, now the Republican coalition is all Black and Asian and Latino and gay, and white people need to take a back seat. Like, this guy is a conservative, theoretically, who shows up on all kinds of major platforms, including Fox News. And this is basically what we get. And no one's going to go after that guy. He's not going to become untouchable. And let's be clear, a lot of conservatives have been more than happy to platform anti-white voices in the hopes of persuading them, or in most cases, just ignoring their anti-white views entirely so they can talk about something else. They really didn't care at all. And so, yeah, I don't think you should hate Jewish people. I think it's justifiable for Jewish people to worry when people make announcements, talking about why people should hate them. But I thought the same thing about white people for the last 20 years and had very little support on that issue. And now, finally, we have some voices. It's now becoming okay to recognize that there is a real anti-white problem. But we haven't gone through and had some witch hunt, deplatforming and not talking to anyone on the left who's ever said anything like that, or many people on the right who have said similar things. Like, that just hasn't happened. We literally had guys who ran the Republican Party talking about how the left is the real party of America because they look like America. I mean, we all know what he's saying there, but there's no call to just purge these people from the Republican movement. They're not beyond the pale. They're not untouchable. Again, I don't like what Fuentes has said in this arena, but I'm not going to treat it as unique. Like, it's just as bad when people say it about white people or black people or anyone else. And sorry, there isn't some special magical carve out for anti-Semitism. So yeah, I agree. He shouldn't be talking like that. And I think we should ultimately push back against it. But if you're pushing back with that all of a sudden because you've discovered this amazing fire, but you didn't care about anti-white discrimination for 20 years, and you're more than fine with platforming people who have encouraged it, then I'm sorry, I don't really see how this isn't hypocrisy.
The audience couldn't see it. I think you could. I had a bit of a sardonic smile as you were talking there. It wasn't necessarily about your comments, but the audience has heard some of this. Todd and Aaron over the years have heard way more of it. The thing I hate in this industry more than anything else is let's go find some double-digit IQ with more melanin in their skin, give them a bunch of right-wing talking points, and have them speak into a teleprompter to absolutely engagement farm the bleep out of a bunch of white boomers who have been falsely smeared as racist their entire lives and are anxious to prove that they really haven't been. And right. You just kind of spoke to that a little bit because that hits me in the heart. Okay, that is one of my chief complaints about this racket that you and I are currently working in. So let's get to the Israel question. Again, I'll just share exactly what I wrote. I am not worried about Israel. If this iteration of Israel is prophetic, as many claim, God will protect it with or without us. If it is not prophetic, but pagan, as many others claim, God will deal with it accordingly, with or without us. I'm way more interested about where these particular conversations go and what they say about us. In general, I cannot think of a time a society has become better by, blaming the Jews for everything. And I didn't write this, but I'm just going to add this. And I really hate that some people are making me agree with Ben Shapiro again. In fact, I resent it a lot, as a matter of fact. Okay, but it is what it is. All right. So your reaction, go ahead.
Obviously, just offloading all of your problems to some idea of a worldwide Jewish conspiracy or something like this is not helpful. That's, of course, as true for Americans as it is true for any other group, as you point out. Outsourcing your own blame is never good. That said, that's not just what's happening here. We're not. It's not like we're having some kind of problem in America, therefore it must be Israel's fault. I mean, we're sending these people a pile of money every year that they don't need. And anytime you ask why, nobody has a good answer. Oh, they give us intelligence. It's $4 billion. Build an intelligence agency, man. I don't know what to tell you. George Washington specifically said, we should not be entangled in this exact type of relationship. Do we care about the founders or not? Do we have principles or not? You can say Israel is a good or bad country. I don't care. I don't want to be involved with the UK being necessary to our intelligence operations, or Israel or Ukraine I don't want any of these to be our greatest allies. I don't want them to be our greatest enemies. I don't want to hate them. I don't want to love them. I want to do what George Washington said. I want to be a sovereign nation. And you can't be a sovereign nation, especially Washington Warren, specifically a sovereign republic, when you have favored nations, because it will engender exactly what we are seeing now. Factionalism entirely centered on the rejection or accepting of that favored nation. This is dumb. We don't need this. We don't need Israel, and they don't need us. So we should just walk away from each other. Let them do whatever they want. Let them be sovereign. But I'm sorry, like, I can't just sit around and pretend like, well, it's just that some people don't like Israel. It's like, no, there's some material reasons why we need to have this conversation. I think it needs to not veer into hatred or, anti-Semitism or any other form of ethnic hatred. But if we can't have this conversation, if we as Americans cannot reject a foreign government, we are owned by that government. And I can say whatever I want about the president of Ukraine. No one's going to throw me out of any kind of movement for criticizing Vladimir Zelensky and his constant desire for aid. No one attacked me when I pointed out that the UK Labour Party was sending political activists to manipulate our election in the United States. I am consistent across the board. UK, Ukraine, Israel. I don't want any of them influencing my politics. I don't favor one of them. I don't disfavor the other one. But I should be able to criticize Bibi Netanyahu's explicit intention of manipulating our politics. He has said it out loud. I don't know what else to say. He has announced repeatedly how much money and effort he is pouring in to impacting our vision of that country through social media influencers. He held meetings announcing this. Like, that's not good. It's not good when Putin does it. It's not good when Zelensky does it. It's not good when the UK Labour Party does it. And it's not good when Israel does it. And we should be able to say that without pretending it's anti-Semitic.
All right. We're going to run out of time. So after I talk about Jace Medical, I think I'm just going to jump to my conclusion because I want to get your reaction to it. Because some of the other things we've kind of touched on in other sectors of this conversation. But our friends at Jace Medical, they came on board at the right time, right when they saw what your government was doing with ivermectin, a Nobel Prize winning drug that now wanted to retcon as horse paste. And that's why they came on board, because they were concerned, hey, if they can do that to, a drug that they just gave an award to, what about drugs that are 100 years old? Amoxicillin, doxycycline, that they could do this to the next time, maybe that could never happens here. And that's when they came on board. But since they've come on board, they have greatly expanded their menu of options to make sure you're as prepared to take as much control over your healthcare as you possibly can, so that you're not taken by surprise, right? So many options available to you right now when you go to jace.com. That's Jase, jace.com. Enter the promo code DACE at jace.com for a discount when you're there. That's jace.com. They're putting powerful, trusted medications and preparedness in your hands ahead of time, so you're ready for whatever comes next from the spirit of the age. All right, jace.com. Promo code DACE for the discount at jace.com. All right, Auron, let me just jump to the conclusion here. We got about 3 minutes. All right. It is no coincidence that much of this has happened after Charlie's martyring. I can testify firsthand he was working to keep malignant forces like Fuentes at bay. In the final month of his life, Charlie asked me to join him in a private one-on-one signal chat whose primary goal was to devise and deploy a strategy to make sure that Fuentes and Groypers never gain a foothold in the movement. He was convinced they would extinct us, both spiritually and politically, and God would never bless such darkness. This chain of events is also no coincidence. Our apostolic leader was murdered, the demonic Democrats' full-throat embrace of Islamunist Mamdani, and the current division over Fuentes. This is the spiritual counterattack to the seeds of revival we saw at Charlie's memorial. Pat Buchanan was right about some things. Bill Buckley was wrong about some things. It's okay to say that. We don't always have to take on everyone's legacy whole hog. I started out this thread by inspirationally invoking Luther, without whom Western civilization probably dies hundreds of years ago. But sadly, anti-Semitic screeds at the end of his life are part of his legacy too. We've all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. What Trump has done, even without realizing it, is that he has taken the positive aspects of Buchanan's views and discarded the bad, in my view. We can keep this coalition together if we follow that example. I've got 90 seconds. I'm going to give you the last word.
I would say in the same vein, it was very clear, and Charlie Kirk was very adamant about this, we are not canceling Tucker Carlson. He will continue to appear at these events, and that's knowing all of the opinions that Tucker Carlson has that are controversial. He knew that this coalition, the one that he wanted to lead, the one that he thought that Trump could ride to victory, absolutely, positively must have Tucker Carlson and his audience inside of it. And after he was shot, the left justified his murder by saying he was a fascist. The bullet literally had, "Hey, fascists, catch this," written on it. And right after, people like me were pushing immediately to say we have to ban this charge in the United States. We have to make it basically impossible to call someone a Nazi, call someone a fascist in the United States, because that gets people killed. That gets people murdered. We all agreed with that. Ted Cruz tweeted out the same thing, agreeing with that. And then we immediately turned around and said, actually, our party is full of Nazis. And right before an election, we're going to run around and we're going to have a witch hunt, driving out all the Nazis. The left was right. We are full of Nazis. We are all fascists. And now, rather than fight the left, rather than push back on the left that's trying to murder us, that murdered Charlie Kirk with the charge of fascism, we're going to say, actually, we're Antifa. And we're going to go on a crusade to crush the fascists. We validated Charlie Kirk's death. We validated the assassination. It's the worst thing we possibly could have done.
Auron, I appreciate you doing this. Also, I've told several of my Jewish friends, canceling Tucker will do the same thing to our coalition that mainstreaming Fuentes will do. It'll splinter it, but just in the other direction. Good to see you, my friend. Thank you for this today. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks again for having me.
You bet. Go hard, Romans 8:28.